Hi, I'm Dr. Bruce Chalmer. What happened to the passion you used to have in your relationship, and how can you get it back? Remember when you couldn't keep your hands off each other, when sexual energy buzzed between you, when you glowed with pleasure and desire when you came into each other's presence? What happened to all that? Now, if your problem is that your partner is abusing you or humiliating you or controlling you, you don't need this video, you need a safety plan. Get help and get safe. What I'm talking about in this video is relationships that have somehow gone cold. Maybe you do well together in the business aspects of life, running the household, taking care of the kids, paying the bills, but you miss that sense of connection you once felt. Maybe you're squabbling about trivia or constantly irritated with each other, or maybe you've just given up trying to talk about anything important. And what about your sex life? What was once exciting and new has become routine or maybe non-existent. You don't seem to be able to talk about it, much less improve it. It's just too scary to go there. And it's painful, maybe painful enough that you're wondering if the relationship can survive. A lot of the couples in this situation who come to work with me in couples therapy are on the verge of divorce or separation. The prospect of staying in a relationship without intimacy, sexually or otherwise, is awful. Well, let me give you some good news and some bad news. The good news is your problem is normal. I don't mean it's just what you have to expect, so suck it up, though that's what some couples do. I just mean it's normal in the sense that it happens as a developmental stage in most long-term relationships. Couples lose the sense of passionate connection as a consequence of very normal processes. I'll talk about them shortly. Doesn't sound like good news, does it? But the good part is that once you recognize what's happening, you can change it. You're not stuck with it forever. So that's the good news. The bad news is that changing it is scary. It's scary precisely because you've lost the connection as a consequence of avoiding anxiety. So the solution will involve tolerating that anxiety. It's scary because you'll have to face your own fears. Fear of your own desires, fear of challenges to your core beliefs and values, and fear of the loss of the relationship. So how does it happen? How do couples start out hot and spicy and end up cold and bitter? Oddly enough, it's not primarily because the novelty of a new lover wears off. It's true that we humans seek novelty in lots of ways, and sex with a new partner can be exciting just because it's new. But I've seen lots of long married couples who have had bursts of sexual passion with each other when some crisis occurs. Say one or the other has had an affair or has actually moved out. I don't in the slightest recommend having an affair or moving out as a strategy to spice up your marriage, because it will probably end it. But that sort of thing shows at least that you don't need a new partner to have passion rekindled. And it's not just about hormone levels. Hormone levels are just one factor in human sexuality. While 25-year-olds are usually capable of more sexual gymnastics or more frequent orgasms than their elders, the deepest expressions of intimacy and even the most intense levels of sexual connection are a function of maturity. No, the real buzz killer is not familiarity or waning hormones. The real buzz killer is fear, or rather what we do to avoid fear. Think about it. You want intimacy, of course, but you also want stability. In fact, once you've found what feels like intimacy, once you love someone and sense that they love you, one of your biggest fears is that you'll lose it. It's terrifying and gets more terrifying the more important you become to each other. And that fear of loss, ironically, is what drives the wonderful death spiral that kills intimacy. Because as it turns out, that amazing person you fell in love with is actually different from you. And some of those differences are scary. You don't like the way she talks about your family. She doesn't like how your family talks about her. You don't like how he seems to flirt with pretty much everyone. He doesn't like how you get distant from him when you're out together with other people. Neither one of you likes how the other one spends money, or cleans too much or too little, or sleeps, or makes love, or wants to make love, or doesn't want to make love. At first, it's easy enough to ignore the differences or just accept them or even revel in them. Wow, she likes yogurt. I guess I do too. Huh, never thought of that position before. He's amazing. But sooner or later, you encounter differences you can't ignore and can't simply accept either. You need to do something. So you try to bring up how you felt when he talked to you that way or touched you that way that was uncomfortable. Could you try going a little slower? Or you've noticed she seems to be avoiding you and you're worried about it. Or you really want to try something in bed and don't know how she'll react if you bring it up. And that's the problem. You don't know how your partner will react when you bring it up. Maybe you've already had times when it went off the rails, when you ended up in a screaming fight or a deep freeze. You got sensitized to each other's rising anxiety. The more important you are to each other, the more you tune into each other's fears. And when you sense that your partner is getting upset, it upsets you too. What happens next depends, of course, on your couple's particular style. Let me refer you to Robert Frost's poem, Fire and Ice, the one that starts, "Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice." If your style of destruction is fire, your relationship will turn into a war zone. Anything can set you off. You might have periods of truce or even hot connection, but eventually your mutual reactivity will go nuclear. If it keeps on like that, you'll despair of ever trusting each other's goodwill. If it's ice that does your passion in, you won't start a fight when you get to a scary difference. Instead, you'll gradually reduce what you'll risk with each other. You'll find yourself censoring what you might bring up so as not to trigger anxiety. You'll give up on any sort of sexual activity that risks anxiety and settle on routines you're both comfortable with, which reduces your lovemaking repertoire to the dreary and predictable and might turn into nothing at all. You'll keep more and more of yourself hidden, at least from your partner. You shut down more and more of yourself for the sake of peace. You feel like you're carrying around a heavy weight at home. Some people in this situation succumb to the lure of an affair. It's so compelling when you can actually be yourself with someone who seems to want you as you are. Either way, whether it's by fire or ice, if left unchecked, this process leaves you feeling alone, frustrated, and miserable. And as I said before, this is a normal process in a long-term relationship. It doesn't happen with every couple, but sooner or later, most of us have to deal with it. Of course, what you'd hope is to see the signs and figure out what to do about it well before you get to the stage of alone, frustrated, and miserable. But what about those couples you might know who seem to have kept the spark alive for decades? Well, if you're lucky enough to be in one of those couples, it's because you and your partner learned what you needed to learn, either by going through it with each other or from past relationships. One way or the other, you grew up enough that you could tolerate the anxiety of difference without either freaking out or shutting down. And that's the key. If you want your passion to last, you have to be a grown-up. If you want to escape the cycle of fire or ice, you have to learn what you need to learn to master the skills it takes to handle intimacy. Most of us aren't born with these skills. We have to learn them. Because you can have intimacy that flames or freezes out over time, or you can have stability that goes on for years without intimacy. But you can only have both lasting intimacy and lasting stability if you're mature enough to handle it. So what do you do if you're stuck in a passionless relationship? What skills do you need to master to help you attain the sort of maturity I'm talking about? And what's the key to learning those skills? That's the subject of part 2 of this video. I'm Dr. Bruce Chalmer. If you have topics you'd like me to address, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you.